Hello and welcome to Aduro's Six Aspects of Life series. Aduro has been around for now almost 15 years, focused on all facets of an individual's well-being and their ability to move from a state of struggling to a state of flourishing. We are so uniquely positioned to not only impact you as an individual, but also impact an organization and their ability to drive cultures that both thrive, flourish, and sustain through these challenging times and for the road ahead. The series will focus on 6 themes that range from mental health, mindset, purpose, lifestyle, relationships, growth, and prosperity. And by focusing on these 6 interrelated aspects, we're going to provide you as an employer with the groundwork that you'll need to drive the types of outcomes that are most important to your people, but also to put you as an individual in a place where you understand what is possible and how you can institute and drive change, and what that means for you both now and long term. We're so excited that you're going to be with us, and we wish you all the best as you continue on your journey, whether you're an organization navigating these waters or an individual just starting out today. We know that you can do it. We wish you all the best with this session ahead. Thanks so much.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. I am Tony Best, the Chief Human Performance Officer and a founder at Aduro, focusing on our people experience and building a culture where people can find the joy of striving to reach their potential at work. And I have with me today the brilliant Jyoti Cabario, who is one of our senior human performance coaches and our resident expert in belonging and inclusion at Aduro. Welcome, Jyoti. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. So as Tony mentioned, senior human performance coach. So I work with a lot of our members one-on-one with coaching. I also founded the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coalition at Aduro, which is our employee resource group around that. I am the founding member of the Belonging and Inclusion Council, where we dive into strategy around inclusion and belonging, both internally and externally. And various other things, was the creator and leader in the development of our Aduro Belonging Index. I facilitate a variety of workshops that really help us dig into some meaningful conversations around belonging, and have done a lot of trainings myself outside of Aduro, so I can help to further this work here.
Great. Thank you, Jyoti. We're both delighted to be here to talk with you today about fostering a culture of belonging for your employees. And we know you're going to walk away today with ways to do that inside of your organization. We're going to dive deeply into belonging, because we know that building a sense of connection between coworkers and the work that you're doing can be a better motivator to stay at a job over money. And leaders really need to make this a priority to keep excellent talent in the organization. And you'll walk away with some tangible steps to get started in your organization today. So, Jyoti, let's start everyone off with really just defining belonging. What does belonging mean, and why does it matter?
Definitely. So belonging is when you really feel like your authentic self is celebrated, is welcomed. It's when you can take off the mask of who you aspire to be or might pretend to be, and you really feel comfortable showing up and contributing in a very authentic way. And so it's often confused with fitting in. Belonging isn't really fitting in. It's essentially being yourself and feeling respected and safe to share your ideas and your opinions in a safe way, to challenge others and to be challenged yourself without that fear. So again, not really fitting in, but still having that safety and that respect, that mutual respect.
Great. I think this is a journey that we have been on at Aduro, and I think that that's largely in thanks to you. You've been at Aduro for 4 years and some, I think. And
Mhm.
so I know that one of the first conversations that you and I had when you started was really some things that surprised you in joining an organization like Eduro. So tell us a little bit about what started this journey of belonging at Eduro, what your experience was when you joined, and what drove you to make this journey of belonging your mission at Eduro.
Yeah. So it was an interesting transition from the work that I was doing before I worked at Eduro. I worked with nonprofits, with government agencies, a lot of the similar sphere to coaching, but in a more, again, nonprofit and public arena, which had a very heavy focus on inclusion and belonging. So it was an interesting transition to go from that to something that is still a very mission driven, service oriented organization, and not really have that conversation or have it be something that was talked about a lot. And it's uncomfortable. So it's a normal thing. So that gap was kind of what sparked my like, yeah, we should probably talk about it, because we offer our services to folks all over the United States. We interact with a lot of different clients and a lot of different individuals who use our services. So just that desire to make sure we're serving our populations in the best way possible, and knowing that this is a really important piece of the puzzle, both for our clients as well as just for our fellow coworkers.
Absolutely. I know as a founder, I know that it's always been central to what we care about, being a human focused organization, both internally and externally. And yet belonging was something that we didn't really have a focused effort around. And so you've brought that forward, and we've been on a journey of this over the last 4 years. And I know that this has been a topic that's really picking up speed just in companies in general. But this last year, with COVID pushing people out into more of a digital world or even a distanced world for people who are still in the workplace, has created an enhanced need for it. And so let's dig in a little bit to just like the rapid increase in the need for fostering belonging in the workplace, because without direct contact or with more distanced contact, it's more difficult to get to know one another. And conversations and things that used to happen in common places, chance meetings, running into people in the hallway, just aren't happening anymore. And so we have to have a more intentional and focused effort on it in our everyday interactions in the workplace. What are some of the things that you have seen that have made a difference in this digital or distanced world that we've lived in over the past year?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been interesting. I think the more opportunities you can have for genuine conversations, the better. There's a lot of digital ways to do that, and people enjoy different formats. So if you're one who loves things like those chat rooms or what have you, or email, that's definitely some opportunities to engage with that. And I've seen a lot of folks who have Zoom water cooler hours or Zoom hangouts or happy hours or game nights or things like that, with their colleagues, to have a little bit more of that that social aspect that they really feel like they're missing in the workplace.
Absolutely. I know our coaching team, which you're a part of, has trivia nights, and different opportunities to connect in that way. Our fun club, our internal fun club, has facilitated some of those opportunities as well. And I know, even thinking from a company perspective, one of the things that we looked at early on was, as we are bringing in new people to the organization, how do we really get to know each other in this digital world? And we have focused in on ensuring that in our onboarding, we have people from every different team in the company that are coming in and sharing what that team does, how it interacts with other teams. And we've gotten some rave reviews on how we've done that onboarding so that people are getting connections to different parts of the company that they might not in their everyday work when they're working just closely with some of the smaller teams. So I think that that's really important as well. I know that you talk to not only people internally at Aduro, but in your work in coaching, you are talking to a wide variety of people from a lot of different companies. Tell us what you're hearing from them that seems to be the big impacts of this past year on their sense
Yeah,
of belonging at work.
absolutely. Well, that social aspect at work is definitely a big one. Um, and I have definitely heard for a lot of the people that I'm coaching that that type of digital communication, it's okay, but it still feels a little bit hollow. Um, and so that's still something that, they're trying to work on. Um, a few other things that have stood out as well is just this kind of lack of psychological safety in the workplace. For certain groups, that has definitely been a thing for a long time, particularly marginalized identities. But over the last year in particular, that has become more and more and more and more heightened. Um, and so just kind of all around a lack of psychological safety. Um, and some interesting noticings, especially as we lean heavily on digital communication, that age gap in the workplace is becoming a little bit more pronounced in terms of ease of communication and feeling like you belong with a group of people who might communicate a little bit differently or understand that mode of communication differently.
Psychological safety is a big thing, and I think we're going to dig into that a little deeper here in a bit. I think, even in companies that have a big focus on belonging and on building relationships internally, like Aduro, this is something that we're continuously working on. We had talked about earlier, even just in the beginning of team meetings, we do well-being check-ins with each other at the beginning of one-to-ones. We do those well-being check-ins. But even knowing that if you haven't spent the time to really build those internal connections, and you might say that you care personally when I'm talking as a leader, showing it over and over again to build that trust so that people know they can safely tell you how things are really going is important. And that's one of those foundations of psychological safety that we're going to get into. But I think just in thinking of, these different things that you're seeing, that you're hearing from people in all different companies, the things that we see at Aduro, we know that there's so many different things that we have to look at in creating a culture of belonging. And so the first question is, where do we belong? Where do we begin in this journey to belonging? And I think that there's several different perspectives that we have to look from, and different approaches that we have to take. There's the collective approaches of looking at our systems and our processes, everything from our hiring practices and our performance development opportunities and our pay equity strategy, to the foundations of culture, having common language and agreed to behaviors, core values, leadership principles. You've instituted a set of community agreements that we use at Aduro. And this is really building on that interpersonal dialogue and the shared language and leader training and group experiential workshops. So it can be kind of overwhelming, even just thinking from a collective perspective. And then you get into the individual stuff, like individual cognitive development, our worldviews, our self-awareness and personal growth, and how that relates into outward behaviors like our awareness of implicit bias and infinity bias, and how we can decrease discrimination in the workplace. So knowing where to start starts with knowing where you are. So where do we start?
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself, Tony. I think it starts with knowing where you are. You have to really assess where you currently stand so you know where your gaps are and where you need to grow, and where your strengths are and where you can build from. And so that was actually one of the first steps that that we took as an organization. I worked with the DE&I coalition to put together and test a survey so we could actually understand where Aduro stood in terms of inclusion and belonging, just to give us a baseline. So I had pulled together validated questions from a variety of validated indexes that already existed, both from free and paid resources, as well as kind of getting some group source information from the company in what are some other things that we might be interested in seeing and measuring. And from there, just tested it a few times and put it out to the company. And so putting together an assessment that works for your company is a really great place to start. There are lots of free resources out there, but at the end of the day, know what you want to measure and where you want to make sure you are, you're, I guess, hitting it home. One thing I will mention that's very important when creating really any policy, but especially in an assessment, intentionally include diverse perspectives and voices when you're creating this, when you're sourcing questions, when you're running test groups, because those are the voices that tend to get left out. Those are the voices that tend to represent a small portion of the population and may not have a lot of data around, but are so important when you're looking to create an overall culture of belonging.
Absolutely. I think I want to highlight what you said about deciding what matters to you as an organization and ensuring that you're assessing on that. I know that we had many conversations and hesitations about creating our own questions or asking things that weren't validated. And I had an amazing conversation with a woman named Karen Taylor, who's the Chief Diversity Officer at Workday and a pioneer in the field. And Workday actually has an index, I think they call Vibe, that that is part of their product. And even she said to me, like, yes, you can use ours, but what's most important is that you as an organization know what you're trying to create and ask questions that are going to help you see where you stand and will point you in the direction of what you need to do to get there. So we did end up creating some of our own and using some of those validated measures as well. And so talk to us a little bit just about, we talked about how we have to look from multiple different directions. And so how did you and the team set up that assessment to do so?
Yeah, we decided that we really wanted to look at it from that multifaceted lens of both the collective and the individual, like we outlined earlier. Belonging isn't something that just relies on the individual. It's not something that just relies on the organization. It's a collective effort. And so we decided to look at it from three different kind of scales. One was the perceived importance of belonging, which is that kind of personal importance, the perceived importance that you would see from your manager and from your leadership. The second was having a place to belong. So how is that perception of how the company is really developing or living into that culture of belonging? And then third was creating a space to belong. So how are you as an individual contributing to that culture of belonging? So it gives you that breadth of perceptions on these three different fronts.
Yes, absolutely. It's an every person thing, right? It's both comes from the company and it's how every individual interacts with each other. And then once we assess, we have to know where we're going and then know if we're making progress. So we've done a lot at Aduro. We use an OKR system to set our annual goals, and Aduro has 5 main objectives of the year. We have set belonging and equity and inclusion as one of the top priorities at Aduro. So one of our 5 main objectives for the year is providing an equitable fire starter experience. This means that we have some very clear key results that we want to focus on creating an equitable experience, on creating a culture of belonging. And one of them is improving our measure of belonging internally at Aduro. So what do you think is important when it comes to accountability? Because the accountability is really back to the people of the organization. What do you think is important when it comes to accountability and making it clear that we're making progress?
Definitely. This is where, and Tony and I have had some conversations on how like actions speak louder than words. The accountability here is not just to create the index and like put it out there, have people answer it and say, okay, good job. It's to actually say, okay, what are our takeaways from this? What are the gaps that we're seeing? Like, what are we wanting to create action around? And then make an action plan around it. And once you have, whether it's, formal goals like we have at Aduro or however it fits into your organization, start there and make it transparent to the company so that folks know that not only is this important, but there is work being done, and they know that work is being done, and continue to reassess. So like whether it's every 6 months or once a year, continuing to put out the assessment, put out those goals, be transparent, and have that form of accountability as an ongoing practice is incredibly important.
Yes, I know, we're talking a lot about setting company goals. I think it's important to say that our journey of belonging at Aduro started with a grassroots campaign, right? So it was you
Mhm.
and some of our other employees at Aduro who put together this diversity, equity, and inclusion coalition, where the conversations started more at a grassroots level than they did really in creating company goals. And so it was that movement internally that prompted us to set our intentions and our goals from a company level. And so I think no matter where you're starting from, you don't have to be the company founder or even a leader in the company in order to actually make measurable improvement in a company culture. And I think vice versa, we set that company OKR around an equitable fire starter experience. And that prompted many of our teams to rethink their own team goals. Our marketing team really started focusing in on inclusive imagery and language. Our content and media labs team has OKRs around the inclusivity of content and the representation in our images. And so I think that that's, a beginning of something that will continue to grow as individuals continue to embody these principles inside of an organization too. I wanted to highlight one of our most interesting insights and when you measure what that can bring up and what you need to focus on. And so Aduro's most interesting insight, our highest scores were in these two questions. I successfully create an environment in which my peers are willing to express their real feelings or opinions, and I feel respected and valued by my manager at my company. Really great things to score highly in. And our lowest scores were I can voice an opposing opinion without fear of negative consequences. And working with people from different teams is never a challenge to me. So these seem to be in opposition, but they really give us a great insight into what's happening inside of the company. So what do you think that points to?
Definitely. It points to, we spoke on it earlier, right? That interpersonal psychological safety, that, there's a pervasive perception or feeling that, well, I do a really good job, but I don't feel like I have that with the other person. So if collectively everyone is feeling that way, there's a huge lack of psychological safety in being able to, show up and actually feel respected and valued and actually feel like you can challenge things without having any negative consequences.
Yes, yes. And psychological safety is a really big and important topic. And that is an entire conversation on its own. But just so everyone who's watching now understands, give us an overview of what psychological safety is and what it is we're trying to create.
Yeah, and so this is a pretty foundational part of belonging. It's being able to act and engage with others without that fear of negative consequences. It's knowing that you can be challenged or that you can challenge others without that fear to either physical or emotional or career oriented safety or what have you. There's multiple different aspects to psychological safety, and I won't go too far into them, but suffice to say that there's things like inclusion safety, learner safety, so like being able to learn in public without being ridiculed or judged, contributor safety, and challenger safety. So challenger safety is kind of self-explanatory, but you need those other three in order to be able to have that challenger safety. So, we really have to think about which of those is missing. And for us, it was that inclusion and that challenger safety and why. And that information is really important in knowing where to improve or where we can focus our efforts. Now, that being said, it's important to remember that psychological safety in the workplace traditionally for marginalized groups has been a challenge for a long time, both in perception as well as in reality. And so we bring our past with us when we show up to our current day. And this is something that we can't forget. So if someone isn't showing up and feeling like they have psychological safety, there could be very valid reasons as to why, based on their past experiences or just knowing how society might treat them or have treated them in the past.
Mm-hmm. And I know, as you said, this has been a challenge for a long time. It's really come to light through 2020, through the impacts of COVID, through social unrest, through heightening social unrest, and through a polarizing election that really heightened the visibility of cancel culture and the fear of cancel culture, saying the wrong thing, and so being unwilling to necessarily speak one's mind out of a fear of negative consequences. And so this is a focus for us, and I think it's a focus that needs to be in a lot of organizations, is really getting people to appreciate each other's values, even if they are completely opposite in their viewpoints from our own, right? And so what are some ways that we can bring our leaders and individual contributors alike up to speed? This has been a big focus for you in the last year, and where you spent a large part of your time. So what are ways that we can do that in a powerful way that we know can make a difference?
Yeah. So we've done it on a couple fronts, right? We have like different challenges and activities and things in our own internal platform, like our well-being platform. We have as well a complementary set of training that we have not only done for our leaders, but also we've now started to implement it for the rest of our firefighters, our employee base. And this is around things like psychological safety, around things like coaching skills and adaptive leadership, implicit bias, identity, all of this stuff. And what I have learned over time and in my own education and learning is that it's incredibly important to have not only leaders understand this, but have the entire organization on board, have a common set of frameworks of language around this, and understanding, because this, as we've been saying throughout, it's not a one person thing, it's a collective effort. And so those are a few ways to approach it. What I have found really important in these kinds of trainings is that it's not just an informational session, it's an actual dialogue, it's an actual conversation, and it gets uncomfortable. It gets really uncomfortable, and that is good. it's in a good way, and it's in a safe environment where people can come together and actually learn these principles and spend some time thinking about it for themselves, and then spend some time in small groups talking about it, and then some time in large groups too, because there's lots of different ways that people learn, but that discussion element is so incredibly important.
Absolutely. I know I've been a part of these dialogues that you have facilitated. They do get uncomfortable. And I think it's some of the most powerful, both personal growth and interpersonal growth with our own team that I've ever experienced. And you know, I know you and I have talked a lot about uh, the right way and the wrong way to do things. We see data coming out that, you know, traditional implicit bias trainings don't work. And that's why we do a lot of interpersonal dialogue, opening up self-awareness and understanding of other people in real world circumstances where we can learn together and bring those things out in the open. And so you know, again, psychological safety is an enormous topic, and we recently did a webinar on this. So we'll make sure in our notes that we provide a link to that for anyone who wants to dive deeper into psychological safety. But I think, you know, to bring it around to putting this into practice, some of the, you know, the things that we know about belonging, if we even just think about how you know, Gallup measures engagement in the workplace. We know that people who can say that they have a best friend at work are 7 times more likely to be engaged in their jobs. They are better at engaging their customers, producing higher quality work, have higher well-being, and are less likely to get injured on the job. And so this focus on belonging really goes hand in hand with people being engaged in their work. And, you know, right now, only 30% of employees are engaged in their work, according to Gallup, but only 35% of managers are engaged in their work. So you can imagine if leaders and managers aren't engaged in their work, how can we expect individuals to be engaged? And so, you know, I think there's a really important focus on getting leaders together. We got our executive team together to have these conversations. We got our senior leaders, all of our people leaders together to have these conversations. And the time is well worth it. And it makes a difference for everybody's well-being in the organization. So we've talked about a lot. I want to leave it with some really powerful actions, Jyoti. And so what is the first step that companies and people need to take to foster the sense of belonging in their workplace?
Definitely. It starts with just assessing where you are. Give yourself some baseline information so you know where you need to go from there. And then to set some goals and follow through with that action plan. Create that transparency so that folks know what you're working on and they know what their progress is. And they know that that commitment, it isn't just a spoken word, it's actually being followed through in the actions.
Absolutely. I love, you said earlier, actions speak louder than words. And we report back on our progress to the organization every 2 weeks. And we give real-time access to our action plan to the entire company so they can follow along with our progress. And I think that that's really important, just in keeping people along on the journey, not only from their personal experience, but to show what's going on behind the scenes. So we really try to work in public. How can Aduro help people with this? I think we've mentioned that we did a psychological safety webinar, and we'll be sure to put that in the notes. Support your leaders and managers. Aduro actually has a leader training, a workshop series that is around unlocking mental health in the workplace through leadership. And I think this is something that's really important as well. You can unlock the potential in your workplace by providing access to coaching and development through all the 6 areas of life to your employees. And Jyoti, as you mentioned, we have a set of activities and challenges that can help along with that to unlock these different pieces of belonging in your workplace as well. And then, when we wrap it back up with this idea of how important leaders and managers are in creating that engagement and belonging in the workplace, we recommend teaching your leaders to coach. So we know that our employees, our fire starters, as we call them, get a lot out of working one-on-one with our coaches, but also in supporting our leaders through giving them coaching skills as well. And this is a program we have internally that will also be released externally to our clients here shortly within the next few months. So with that, Jyoti, I want to thank you so much for your time and also just for all of the effort and the leadership that you put in at Aduro to help us create and foster a culture of belonging at Aduro, and how we've been able to take a lot of those things and translate that into products and services and support for our clients and our members as well. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.